Should nothing of our efforts stand, no legacy survive, unless the Lord does raise the house in vain, its builders strive. To you who boast tomorrow's gain, tell me, what is your life? A mist that vanishes at dawn, all glory be to Christ.
Welcome to the Open Bible Podcast. I'm Pastor Jeremy Kaliba, and along with Ethan Jones, we've been looking at a chapter of Proverbs a day as we seek to be conformed into the image of Christ. And as we begin our chapter, Proverbs 13, just let us be reminded a little bit of some of the major definitions that we've come across in the book so far. Firstly, that wisdom, as it's described in Proverbs, is living by faith according to God's character and order. And so it begins and ends with Him. And again, folly is living according to our own character and order, our selfish hearts. And as we look at Proverbs, especially from chapter 10 on, we start to see that these isolated proverbs are still shots of sort of the larger picture of living out this wisdom in a variety of ways, in a variety of areas of life. And so they're capturing a particular aspect of wisdom or folly, and usually through the means of parallelism. So let's begin by reading Proverbs 13. A wise son hears his father's instruction, but a scoffer does not listen to rebuke. From the fruit of his mouth a man eats what is good, but the desire of the treacherous is for violence. Whoever guards his mouth preserves his life. He who opens wide his lips comes to ruin. The soul of the sluggard craves and gets nothing, while the soul of the diligent is richly supplied. The righteous hates falsehood, but the wicked brings shame and disgrace. Righteousness guards him whose way is blameless, but sin overthrows the wicked. One pretends to be rich, yet has nothing. Another pretends to be poor, yet has great wealth. The ransom of a man's life is his wealth, but a poor man hears no threat. The light of the righteous rejoices, but the lamp of the wicked will be put out. By insolence comes nothing but strife, but with those who take advice is wisdom. Wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a desire fulfilled is a tree of life. Whoever despises the word brings destruction on himself, but he who reveres the commandment will be rewarded. The teaching of the wise is a fountain of life, that one may turn away from the snares of death. Good sense wins favor, but the way of the treacherous is their ruin. In everything the prudent acts with knowledge, but a fool flaunts his folly. A wicked messenger falls into trouble, but a faithful envoy brings healing. Poverty and disgrace come to him who ignores instruction, but whoever heeds reproof is honored. A desire fulfilled is sweet to the soul, but to turn away from evil is an abomination to fools. Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. Disaster pursues sinners, but the righteous are rewarded with good. A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, but the sinner's wealth is laid up for the righteous. The fallow ground of the poor would yield much food, but it is swept away through injustice. Whoever spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is diligent to discipline him. The righteous has enough to satisfy his appetite, but the belly of the wicked suffers want. You know, as we open up and begin Proverbs 13, I don't know about you, but it reminds me a bit of the prologue of Proverbs, even just in that those opening verses. A wise son hears his father's instruction, but a scoffer does not listen to rebuke. And throughout the chapter, again, our author touches on various aspects of life: speech, wealth, eternal destiny. But I wanted to focus a little bit on a grouping of verses that talk about our hearts. See, God has created our hearts a specific way with specific desires. And I think we see some of these desires come out in these verses. And the first thing that maybe our hearts desire is our hearts desire life. Listen to verse 12. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a desire fulfilled is a tree of life. Our hearts desire life. And I would often refer to this proverb when I was younger. Even when I was dating and engaged to Brittany, I remember, just thinking, I'm not with her. We spent a number of months long distance in our relationship, and just really thinking about this, hope deferred makes the heart sick, this longing. But I think I probably took it a little bit out of context when it comes to that, because our hearts desire life. And this desire for life is given by God, and these states of longing are never satisfied. Our longings are satisfied. How they're satisfied is dependent on the following verse, and I think it's really important that we consider that how these connect, because in verse 13 it says, "Whoever despises the word brings destruction on himself, but he who reveres the commandment will be rewarded." So do you see how these states of longing are dependent, their satisfaction, the satisfaction of our hearts are dependent upon accepting or rejecting God's word, God's inspired commands. See, God's way is good. It is life. And walking in his way is what brings the satisfaction, the desire of our hearts for life. I've seen this a number of times. We have decisions, or we have to choose whether we're going to follow God's word. One of these is, I was just talking with some friends about an example of confronting a fellow believer in sin. And we wrestle with that in our minds and say, you know what, if I talk to them about this, maybe they're going to push me away. Maybe they're going to turn from God. And when we fear, we have all these fears that maybe we shouldn't do it because of this or because of that. But when we trust that God's way is good, and when we step out in faith, even in something difficult like that, a difficult conversation in talking about sin, God is faithful. God's way is good in the way that he's given us his word. Now, that doesn't guarantee a certain outcome or how that person will react. But at least in this case, we're able to affirm and just say, hey, you know what? God's way is best, and his way is good. And depending on him, by obeying his word, brings life. But it not only brings life, it also leads to favor. And I think this is where we find another desire of our hearts. Look at verse 15. Good sense wins favor, but the way of the treacherous is their ruin. Our hearts desire favor before God and others. We desire to be esteemed, to be pleasing and attractive, and to live a life according to wisdom, and living a life according to wisdom, according to God's word, will do so. It will be pleasing. It will be attractive to those around us. And I've seen this in the walk of mature believers in my life, and looking at their lives and being, wow, there's something about them. And maybe you've experienced this too. But in Romans 14, we find this as well. In Romans 14, verse 18, whoever thus serves Christ is acceptable to God and approved by men. Again, we have this desire of our hearts to be favorable before God and others, and not to earn grace, but just to be pleasing, to be a pleasing aroma, to be attractive before others. And when we obey God and his word, I think that desire is satisfied. Our hearts not only desire life and favor, but our hearts also desire security. And we see this in verse 16. In everything, the prudent acts with knowledge, but a fool flaunts his folly. Here again, we have the contrast between someone who is prudent and the fool. And to be prudent here is to see, is to act out of knowledge, right? And it's to see danger beforehand and to take refuge, or it's to speak cautiously. And I think really what comes across is it's to know that there's a link between our behavior and certain consequences. And the fool, on the other hand, ignores this connection. And I think we've seen this throughout Proverbs, is that there is a path, and how we act in the moment is determining our destination, right? And so we start to see that, and wisdom, God's wisdom, is acknowledging that link. And if we think about our own lives and times where we've been foolish, the fool ignores this connection, right? They can't see past their desire in the moment and flaunts their folly, right? And so our hearts desire security, and the security again comes from acting with knowledge, from acting out of wisdom that God has given us in his word. And fourthly, our hearts desire relationship. And we're going to jump to verse 20. Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. This is an example of that link that we just sort of mentioned, one of the links that God has given us in life. And this link is that who you walk with will affect your walk, right? Who you associate with will affect your life. And so I want to encourage you just to stop and take a look around you and ask yourself the question, who is walking with you? Who have you surrounded yourself with? Now, don't abandon your non-Christian or even your unchristian friends, but make sure that you're investing in solid, godly relationships. Now, I've been blessed in this regard over the years, but it takes intentionality and vulnerability. I have a group of friends, we meet weekly. We have some coffee and we just talk about life. It's not always deep or theologically thick, but they're there. They're there, and we chat about our week. We chat about where we're at. We take time to pray for one another. But we want to be faithful husbands. We want to be godly fathers. We want to be good workers. And so when we gather together, we can hold each other to that. Now, there are lots of desires that God has built within us, that he's given us hearts that long for life, abundant life, right? Rich lives full of meaning. And he's given us hearts that desire favor, hearts that desire security, hearts that desire relationship. So where do you go to satisfy your heart's desires? And may it be in God's wisdom. May it be through trusting his character revealed in his word. And may your heart be satisfied in him. Go in peace.